You are watching the New American Media. Live from the Milky Way galaxy, the solar system, planet Earth, the United States of America, Los Angeles, California, to be specific. Hello, everybody. Happy Friday, October the 5th, 2012. Welcome to TNAM Radio here on thenewamericanmedia.com. Thank you for joining us on Agree to Disagree. This is a place where we can have any conversation. We just have to be able to agree to disagree. You don't have to drink our Kool-Aid, and please don't try to make us drink yours. But we're interested in interesting conversations, challenging conversations, thought-provoking conversations, conversations rooted in fact, seeking truth, challenging dogma, and having fun. Thank you for joining us today. If you're not following us on Twitter, please do so. You can find us at American_media_. Go on Facebook and search The New American Media. And then like our page, because we like it when you do that. And especially if you're listening to this after the fact on YouTube, click subscribe and leave your comments. I've had a busy week. Had an interview with Libertarian presidential candidate, former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson on Monday. You can go ahead and check that out at our home base, thenewamericanmedia.com, or youtube.com/thenewamericanmedia. Check out our interview with Governor Gary Johnson. He is your alternative to Robamna. I don't know, whatever you call it. Romney. Rama? The Republican Democratic thing. Some call it a farce. It is what it is. What are you going to do? But we're going to bring in a political analyst, an author, a radio host, a journalist, a pastor. He's also my uncle. Yeah, by the way, somebody out there posted, what was it? We had a previous show. I think it was when the Democrats voted against God in Jerusalem multiple times at the DNC, at their Democratic convention. Somebody left a comment. Great guest, bringing in your uncle. Who are you going to bring in next, your mom? That was awesome. And I think somebody else left a comment, I don't know if it was on that video, said, you suck. Who are you going to bring in next, your mom? You suck. I always give it that Goodwill Hunting accent because I'm imagining that's where they came from. But yeah, I actually do know people in my family that, while I don't agree with them on every topic, they are very well versed and knowledgeable in the theater, the realm of politics. By the way, I don't agree with anyone all the time. I disagree with myself from time to time. So it's not a put down. That's nothing more than honesty. And when you get into any of these conversations, look, when I do my sports show, you're not going to care about the Cleveland Browns, Indians, Cavs, or Buckeyes if you don't already. I'm not trying to sell them to you, but that's what I care about, and that's what I'm going to talk about. But when it comes to politics, I mean, this guy, Brian Engelman, who we're going to talk with, he's quite knowledgeable. So we're going to try to get some historical perspective on these debates because I can only remember a few of them. I've only voted in a few presidential elections. I'm 33 years old. So seeking out someone with a few extra decades of experience, paying attention to this stuff, let's put it into perspective a little bit. We'll bring in Brian Engelman right now. Hello, Bruce. This is Brian with the New American Media. You are live on the air. How you doing, sir?
Doing just great. How are you doing?
Excellent. You sound full of energy and enthusiasm right now.
Very, very much so. Yes, sir.
Okay, no, wait, now he's coming back. There he is. Bruce, I did already introduce you as an author, a pastor, a journalist, a broadcaster, commentator, pastor. I don't know, I'm probably repeating a few of these things here, as well as my uncle, but could you kind of sum up to people where you're coming from, where your background is, and then we'll kind of get into the interesting stories of the past few days here.
Yes. Well, basically, we have a very eclectic background. Been through 3 colleges, have a graduate degree and a seminary degree, majored in history and doubled in broadcast journalism and speech at Westminster College in Pennsylvania. I was in the media for 8 years, covered the presidential debate in '80 with Reagan and Carter, and then made a major career alteration into the ministry. So I've been kind of around the block. I've fought the politicians in Chicago and Youngstown, and probably could write a book about that too.
Well, you've also gotten into sports as well. Touch on that for just a brief second.
Yes, well, my family and I have always been big in sports. We've always encouraged football and soccer and hockey and basketball and baseball and all the sports. And so I believe that sports and athletics build character, and I believe that in some cases it even keeps kids off drugs. And I think there's a danger of making sports kind of a god in our society or an idol, but for the most part, sports are very, very crucial. And I was a sportscaster. I covered as a reporter and a journalist the Pirates and the Indians and the Steelers and the Browns for about 8 years, and covered a World Series and the All-Star game in Cleveland in '81. And so, yeah, I have quite a sports background, too. For many years, I wanted to be a sportscaster, Brian, but I decided to make the adjustment or switch to journalism, hard news journalism, and become a regular reporter. And so, but I continue to dabble in sports, and to this day, I still have a national sports program on some radio stations across the country.
And the name of that and how they can find it?
Sports with Bruce Engelman, and what they need to do, it's a relatively new show. We've been on the air for just a little over a year, and we're in about 10 or 15 states right now and 110 foreign countries on the Internet. They simply need to go on the Internet and just Google Sports with Bruce Engelman or the Key Radio in Chicago, Hammond, Indiana, or call their local affiliate and request that my show be picked up by their station. That's how you grow.
Well, and that's one good point that I also omitted. You've also been a motivational speaker at a lot of different in a lot of different arenas of sport, and I was surprised one day when I showed up to my football game and the players on my team started saying, "Hey, Engelman, your dad's going to be talking to our team today." I said, "What are you talking
That's right.
about?"
They said your father.
Yeah, they thought it was my, and they're like, "Your dad? Why is your dad talking to us?" I'm like, "What in the hell is wrong with? I don't know what you're talking about." I had no idea what was going on. I got a football team, an undefeated football team, about 90 people, and they'll keep saying, "Engelman, your dad's here to talk to our team." I'm like, "What?" I had no idea what was going on, and then it turns out it was Bruce, and he gave a very very. I was mortified. I was petrified, just holding my breath, slinking in my chair in the corner, just waiting for it to be over. I had no idea what to expect. And you came out there quoting the Patton scene, where he's talking to the troops and he's pacing back and forth, and it was good. And a lot of people got a lot of good stuff out of it. And you did become our team's chaplain as we went into the playoffs with an undefeated Brunswick Blue Devils football team. So yes, that was one key component to your resume we left off there. But now that the background,
and by the way, I've two points about that. Number one, what would your dad have said had he been the speaker before the team? And number two, I will never forgive your father for not telling me they were going to honor me at that football banquet.
Look, I have no. What would my dad say if he were? I have no idea. But obviously, Bruce and my father are brothers. But let's move it over to politics here, because in theory, we're all supposed to be brothers in this country. In theory.
That's right.
We're supposed to be
right.
together. But now it's the 99%, the 1%. It's the war on women. It's Muslims and Jews and Christians and Mormons. And we got to split ourselves every single chance we get. No, we're white. We're black. We're Latino. No, we're this. We're that. And in politics, it's divide and conquer. Split up, get people arguing over fringe issues, and just keep your power at all costs. So we're all supposed to be brothers in this country. They had a debate, and the goal of a debate is to win. It's to present good facts, be charismatic, and walk away with a win. Can you... I want to get your historical perspective on the debates, and I'll give you mine after I get yours. But can you tell me what you saw in the first presidential debate here with Barack Obama and Mitt Romney? And for the record, I want Governor Gary Johnson included, but we'll get to that later as well. What did you take away from this first debate?
Well, Brian, that's a very good question. And by the way, there's a lot of analogous comparisons between sports and politics. You have winners, you have losers. It's very, very competitive. And we sometimes like to translate the sports arena to politics. And of course, a lot of our great presidents were great athletes. The Bushes played baseball at Yale. The most athletic president, Gerald R. Ford, was always kidded for being uncoordinated oaf, but really he's probably the best athlete we ever had. Played football for the University of Michigan. John Kennedy was a great athlete. Reagan was a great athlete, so on and so forth. And then, of course, the epitome of the comparison or parallel between sports and politics is the forum of the old-fashioned Lincoln-Douglas debates. And, of course, we don't really follow that format to the script as much anymore. It's more of a TV event. However, I've been studying debates. As I mentioned before, I was a speech major and a broadcast journalism major and a history major in college. And I've gone back and looked at all the old tapes of Nixon and Kennedy. I've studied those. I was a little boy, so I don't remember. And, of course, I watched the debates between Gerald Ford and Carter in '76 when Gerald Ford said that erroneously that Poland was not a communist country and there was no Russian domination of Eastern and Western Europe, and that cost him maybe the election. I covered the '80 presidential debate personally for ABC News and helped cover it for ABC News as a reporter, and also I was the only reporter for Pennsylvania's largest newspaper, the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review. So I was covering it for both broadcast journalism and for print journalism, the Pittsburgh Trib, and sat literally behind. Dan Rather was 2 rows in front of me. Bob Orr of CBS News was 1 row in front of me, and Henry Kissinger was just to my left. After the debate in the spin room, I could literally reach out and touch George Bush, who was running for vice president. The congressman and ambassador was spinning Reagan's victory. And I can honestly say most reporters and even most John Q. publics have never been in a room one with a president or with one living president at one time. And I had the blessing and the privilege and honor of being in the same room with 3 presidents, because Reagan and Bush would go on to be president, that being Carter, Reagan, and Bush. And so not only have I studied the debates, I actually covered one for CBS and the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review, and I have to say that that was the clearest cut victory and the biggest trouncing in the history of debating. There were no big gaffes by the president. I thought he did overall a fair job. I don't think he was quite as bad as even his liberals are saying he did.
Wait. Hold on. Wait. Let me back up. Are we still talking Reagan-Carter, or are we in current day right now?
No, we're moving on to current now.
Okay, so now in current day, let's Romney v. Obama. Okay, reset.
Oh, he trounced him. Now, he didn't have any great one-liners like Reagan saying, "There you go again," or telling Mondale, "I'm not going to exploit the youth and inexperience of my opponent." There were no great or Bush winking at Gore when he approached his private space. There weren't any big moments like that.
I like trickle-down government. It's something that has flown under the radar. It is something that he's brought up. Mitt Romney has brought up again. But I think, for me, the enduring thing is well, I want to get your take on it, but I just definitely want to say I think trickle-down government is something that they need to keep hammering home. You want to accuse of trickle-down economics and, let people keep their money. That's stupid. Well, it's equally stupid, some think, to have trickle-down government where one group controls everything and allows you to fight for scraps because they're the government and they know better. For me, it's trickle-down government and Obama looking like he didn't want to be there.
Absolutely. I think it was a brilliant stroke on the part of Mitt Romney to take traditionally a typical Democratic argument that they used against Reagan and Bush 41, this trickle-down economics, which isn't really true or accurate, but it had such a pejorative term, and to turn that around and use it against the socialistic and Fabian socialistic policies of the Obama administration. I thought that was beautiful. And you're right, they need to keep hammering it.
And I think they may continue to do it. I've seen them out on the stump speeches, continuing it in the days since. But you alluded to that this is the most definitive debate win that you've seen. Am I characterizing that accurately? Did I hear you correctly when you said that?
No, absolutely. Yes, Brian, you characterized my assessment very, very well. It was a trouncing. It was just a spectacular performance by Governor Romney. I've always liked Romney, and as you know, I predicted 5 years ago even before the last primary cycle was over, that Romney would get the nomination in 5 years and defeat Obama in a landslide. I have not changed from that. I don't listen to the polls. And getting back to the debate, though, I believe that Romney showed the American public, 76 million viewers and listeners, as to how smart he really is. And he's not this vulture capitalist with fangs that killed a steelworker's wife in Ohio, blah, 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 blah. He showed that he's articulate, he's handsome, he's sharp, he's presidential, he's highly intelligent, and he has vast experience in both the business and governmental sectors, whereas President Obama, when he ran against 4 years ago, had no experience in either business or politics. And I thought it was the most glaring victory in the history of presidential debates.
And you're a guy that's covered a few of them, and you've paid attention even prior to the Reagan years, getting to see some of the debates and really following it close and studying history and being involved in politics and, not necessarily preaching from the pulpit, but, understanding the history of how, whether it's the Black Robe Brigade or, there is something to the church and the clergy getting involved politically, because politics equals life and life equals life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. It's all intertwined in the religious and political experience in this country. But I was just stunned. I was stunned because when I watched it, like you said, there wasn't a knockout punch where everyone stopped and went, oh my gosh, Mike Tyson just went down. Tyson's down. It wasn't a knockout punch, but as it kept going, Romney's turning and he's looking at him, and they're showing the president aloof, rolling his eyes, smirking, looking away, looking down, kind of not really answering things, no energy. I felt like I was watching John McCain going through the motions, not really fighting for the job, not really wanting the job. Am I going too far down in the interpretive channel there, trying to make that comparison? Because I never felt like John McCain really wanted it. I think he knew what this crisis was going to be. I don't think he wanted the job. I never felt like he was really fighting, and I got that impression from Barack Obama. What are your thoughts?
No, I would agree. In fact, I'll take it a step further, Brian. I believe that you're right. McCain didn't want it, and the Republicans in the past, with Bob Dole and John McCain picking these 80-year-old guys, almost treat the presidential nomination for their party as a gold watch for 50, 60 years of devoted public service. And McCain knew he wasn't going to win. He knew he was the fall guy, and he didn't want to win. And he didn't try to win. And he fired my good friend Bill Cunningham in Cincinnati for using the president's middle name in a rally. But getting back to the performance of Obama, it was a combination of John McCain's apathy, along with George Bush 41 looking at his watch saying, how soon can I get out of here? I really don't want to be on this platform with Bill Clinton and Ross Perot. And Richard Nixon, who had been sick and tired and didn't use any makeup. Everybody who listened to the debate in 1960, debate experts and debate coaches, speech experts, all said Nixon clean clock on the radio. But if you watch it on TV, Kennedy used makeup. Of course, he was a very handsome guy and young, and Nixon, had that ski nose and then the shadow, and then he had the flu, and he didn't use any makeup, contrary to his advisors. Television was still a relatively new medium at the time, and so if you take the apathy and unwillingness to win of McCain, together with hey, I don't deserve to be here, I don't need to be here, these guys are amateurs, the way Bush 41 kept looking at his watch, every time he looked at his watch, it cost him 1 million votes, and then Nixon's appearance, he was all three. His pants were not ironed. He kept crossing his legs. When they had a rear shot, Obama was crossing his legs. The president kept looking down at the podium or the pulpit, the lectern, and he agreed with the president. You never agree with your opponent. Your uncle has never lost a debate. And the first thing you never do is say, I agree with so-and-so on that, but I disagree. You don't. That's what Al Gore did against President Bush 41 in 2000. At that time, Governor Bush. He kept saying, yeah, I agree with Governor Bush, or yeah, Mr. Bush was right. You don't do that. He was unprepared. He was tired. He was apathetic. He was overconfident, and I don't think he wanted to be there, Brian.
Well, we talked recently in the past few weeks with our friend Ben Swan. He does a show called Reality Check. I don't know if you've had a chance to check him out, but he's out of
Yes.
Fox in Cincinnati, and he had 5 minutes with the president. Maybe I don't know, a few weeks ago when he was in Cincinnati. It's one of those states that you got to win. It's one of those swing states that are 50-50, and you got to spend your time there. Ben Swan hits him with a question about the NDAA, or National Defense Authorization Act, saying that you can be United States citizens can be indefinitely detained without charge or trial indefinitely. That's the first thing that Ben Swan hits the president with. He only has 5 minutes with him. First question is that. Second list. Mr. President, you have a presidential kill list that's extra constitutional, this, that, and the other. What do you say to He hit him with two very difficult questions. Univision has been hammering the president on Fast and Furious as the bodies are piling up in Mexico, rightfully so. But aside from a couple of these things between Univision and Ben Swan, most of what he's doing, he's talking to Entertainment Tonight and David Letterman and The View. He doesn't take tough questions. He doesn't give press interviews from the White House. He doesn't field hard questions, and this media has been bending over backwards saying, look, this is our nation's first half-black president, half-black, half-white. It's a racial moment that we can all be happy about. He's inheriting a horrible economy. The stock market has crashed. The housing crisis is in full swing. It is miserable. We are going to cut this guy so much slack. We're going to cut him every ounce of slack humanly possible, and they have been doing it despite reality. And the reality is that what he's doing is not working. People want to talk about, well, it was 7.8% unemployment. Look, we're moving in the right direction. You've added $5 or $6 trillion in debt to the national debt. You haven't passed a budget in 4 years. Am I happy about 0.3 of a percentage point of double the unemployment that it's supposed to be after the numbers have been rigged? No. Do I feel more comfortable about the direction of where we're headed? And we'd hate to go back to those failed policies of the past. No, our debt is out of control. You can't pass a budget. And I think this guy, the hubris of passing Obamacare, trying to etch his name onto Mount Rushmore, at a time when our nation is falling apart. He had that supermajority, and he burned up all of his equity, even when Scott Brown was elected in Massachusetts, to take Ted Kennedy's spot, to vote no on Obamacare. They changed the rules and found one obscure thing to ram it through anyway, and guess what? Now you have a Republican Congress that will not work with you, but you want to blame the Republican Congress. For me, Bruce, I think this was a couple of things. I really think that this is a sheltered and coddled president who only gives fluffy interviews. And to be honest, when he passed through Obamacare, despite 600,000 people marching in his front steps in Washington, I got the feeling he didn't care about the presidency. He might be more interested in running the UN because he might be a global citizen. I felt that from the beginning, and I'm just wondering now if he even cares about becoming president again.
There's a theory floating out there today, Brian, that he does not want to be reelected, that he is going all out to lose the election. And he not only goes for fluff interviews like The View or David Letterman constantly, but, take his 119 rounds of golf, his 38 vacations paid for by the American taxpayer. This guy has been doing nothing but partying for 3.5 years. The Middle East is literally in flames. We only have one ally over there, that being Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu. He's never really been to Israel. He flew through there one time. He's never made a trip to our only ally. He refused to meet with Netanyahu using the excuse that he didn't have the time, but yet he has enough time to go on The View and Letterman and a campaign fundraiser in Nevada. He was grossly, and we've talked about this before, he was grossly inexperienced for this job and underqualified. He had never been a mayor, never been a congressman, never been a governor. He had no executive experience, never been in the military, never run a hot dog stand as a business, had always been in the governmental sector, and he was basically a law professor and a community activist. And, the media sold us on a bill of goods. We have to have an inexperienced guy. Let's have a Mr. Smith goes to Washington.
Well, he was. But he was in Congress for a year or two, but he was campaigning the whole time for president. So technically,
he was in the Senate. Yes,
in Senate.
But I said he was never a U.S. congressman. He was a senator for 2 years, and of course he was a 6.5-year, 7-year state senator in Illinois, which is a joke. But you're right, Brian. The whole 2 years that he was a U.S. senator, He spent the whole time running for office. He was absent on most of his votes, and when he was there, he would vote neutral. And but he spent his two and a half years in the U.S. Senate out of Illinois campaigning for the presidency. So I said he had never been a U.S. congressman, a U.S. representative. He had never been a governor, never been a mayor, never been a councilman or an alderman, never served on a school board. He had no political experience. And I'm sorry, Mr. President, you're no Jimmy Stewart. And plus, this is Washington, D.C., not Hollywood. We needed somebody with experience to get us out of this malaise, but instead we got an inexperienced rookie, and we're paying the piper for it now.
And what's the job of Bain Capital? What's the job? You get investors, you maximize profit. If you put this guy that knows how to turn around the Olympics and work at Staples and all of the places that he's been involved with, he knows how to turn failures around and make them successes. Now, if he's working for the United States people, wouldn't you think that that would tend to lead to the United States succeeding? I think so. I think that's the hope. Now, you're also talking to someone, Bruce, who doesn't believe in the Republican or Democratic Party. I think they're the same party. I think Governor Gary Johnson is the only vote for someone like me who doesn't believe in it anymore. I held my nose and voted John McCain, who then authored the NDAA, indefinite detention of U.S. citizens, treasonous legislation, let's just face it, that was signed by McCain, authored by McCain, signed by Barack Obama, and Romney supports. I feel like we need to protect our civil liberties, and neither of these puppets are the ones to do it. So why don't you address that concept? Because now it's, well, you can't have a third party in there. That means that Obama will win. Well, what if you don't believe in Romney? What if you would like to see Obama fired? You hope Romney wins, but you don't support Romney, you don't trust Romney, and you need to even keep a closer eye on him than you did with President Obama. What would you say to me on that?
Well, these are one of the few or two of the few areas where we agree to disagree. I know where you're coming from, and I respect your principles. You don't know how much I respect your political principles and convictions, Brian. However, again, you have an old geezer like myself that's been around the block. I supported an independent in George Wallace in '68. He actually won a few states. Ross Perot didn't win any states when he ran as an independent in '92, and then as a reform presidential candidate 4 years later. He did finish second in one state. But I really believe, with all my heart, that that if you vote third party, then you give Obama 3 votes, and you take 2 away from Romney. I believe what Ronald Reagan said. Ronald Reagan was really an independent, to be honest with you. He was a progressive conservative. He was a
the P word. Using the P word. That's a dirty word in my vocabulary.
I know it's a D word. Liberal used to be a good word, and so did progressive, until the modern Democratic Party has so skewed it and made it a pejorative. But Reagan was, one history book described Reagan, a college textbook described Reagan as instead of a staid conservative, he was more of a right-wing populist. So maybe populist would be a better word than progressive. But Reagan got like 80% of the independent vote, and yet he was an ultra-conservative, both fiscally and socially. And Reagan said, you got to change the Republican Party from within. Yeah, you're right. There's very little difference between the two parties. But you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And this country cannot afford another 4 years of this incompetent president.
I agree that this president needs to be fired. I'm a Cleveland Browns fan, and every 2, 3, 4 years we fire our head coach because we have to. Because you give him a little bit of time, and it's very similar. It's very similar, excuse me, to what the mainstream media has done with Barack Obama. You cut him so much slack. Because, look, the Cleveland Browns have been bad for a very long time. It's going to take a few drafts and a few good hiring decisions and a few good seasons to get things turned around. We'll give you some slack. And that's exactly what this entire nation was giving Barack Obama. So much slack. Because it's a tough gig anyway, but you're taking over a really lousy product. But it's time to fire him. I do agree with that. We have not addressed the debt. We haven't passed a budget. Obamacare is a disaster waiting to happen. It's a Trojan horse for a single-payer system to destroy the entire healthcare industry so that it can redistribute wealth. I hate the concept of what's going on, although I'd like to reform some things about our health insurance system. I don't see why you can buy car insurance from 100 companies across state lines, but it's different with health insurance, and you have to tie it to your job. I don't need a job to get my car insurance. Why can't I just... Anyway, it gets a little bit more complicated, but I just don't trust anyone who wants to indefinitely detain United States citizens without charge and without trial. And Obama signed it. Mitt Romney said he supports it in a debate, and I think anyone trying to get that type of power is frightening, Bruce.
Yeah. By the way, I never did address your other question, Brian, and you just alluded to it again. And that is this. The press and the media are more culpable than the president and his party. The press is atrocious. The mainstream media, the mainline media, the as Rush calls them, the drive-by media, they're awful. They're treasonous. You know, when I was working for ABC and CBS, we were all a little bit liberally slanted, and we all voted Democratic most of the time. However, when we went to cover a story, we strove to be fairly objective. We went after Gary Hart as well as Richard Nixon, one a Republican, one a Democrat. We hid in the bushes and found Donna Rice going in and out of Hart's apartment, and that cost him the nomination against Mondale, but we also went after Nixon and Watergate. Walter Cronkite, even though he was an ultra-liberal independent, he gave a commentary that ended Lyndon Johnson's presidential bid because of the long-enduring war in Vietnam and his another day of captivity for 100 and some Americans in Tehran. This is Walter Cronkite. Good night. And that derailed Jimmy Carter's presidency. But the point is, the press are the water boys for this guy. They will never ask him a tough question. And if one of them by accident does happen to ask them a tough question or ask Obama a tough question by Fox, they never follow up on it. And are they worried about the Middle East in flames and an ambassador assassinated? By the way, you don't shoot an ambassador, Brian. That's like killing the vice president of the United States. You don't get away with that. It's an act of war. But no, the media is more concerned about the timing of Mitt Romney's press conference for 3 days than the fact that the Middle East is in flames. These reporters ought to be ashamed of themselves. Brian Williams should be fired. Fired. He should be gone. He's not a journalist. He is a puppet and a lackey for the Obama administration. And I can say that about all of them.
Well, let me pause on that for 1 second, because I want to hit reset here in just a moment and just get into Libya, because Libya, fast and furious, and I don't know if you've seen the recent stuff that came out on Eric Holder. I'm still trying to verify it, but the Daily Caller is reporting that Eric Holder was a part of an armed group of, Black Panther. At Columbia, they had an armed insurrection and broke into the ROTC and changed the name of the lounge to the Malcolm X Lounge. And this is Eric Holder, who's not investigating Fast and Furious, who... Look, we could talk about a lot of these things that are just mounting up for me, just pieces of information that you cannot stop connecting the dots if you just open your eyes and look at the data. And I want to get into Libya, Fast and Furious, Eric Holder on the other side. But I want to wrap up one point. You heard that there's this theory out there that the president doesn't want to be elected. I didn't follow up on that. How do you mean, and where are you hearing that, and for what reasons are some people thinking that Mr. Obama does not want a second term as president?
Well, I've heard it mainly since the lackluster performance, and that's been quite kind, at the debate night before last. He did not even try, and even Bill Maher and James Carville, both ultra-partisan liberal Democrats, said he acted like he didn't even want to be there.
Chris Matthews, too.
And yeah, what did I say? Chris Matthews and James Carville.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's saying it because the body language, it showed. Either it was a guy trying to coast out, I got a 3-touchdown lead, I just don't want to blow it. I'm going to go Marty Schottenheimer on him and play prevent defense. That could be it.
We know what John Elway did with that preventive defense, the famous drive. By the way, John came out and strongly endorsed Mitt 2 days ago. I don't know if you caught that, John Elway.
Bruce,
but,
I know.
we got Clint Eastwood. We got John Elway, man. That's.
Bruce, I know
bad.
John Elway. And Mitt Romney, sir, is no John Elway. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just goofing around. But when you
ever since he killed our Browns, I'm not a big and then what he did to Tim Tebow, I'm not a big John Elway fan, but he's back on my good list for endorsing Mitt. No, your point. Go ahead.
No, I was just asking then about the people saying, well, like, does he even want to get another term? I was just trying to touch on that one more time.
Yes. Well, it's obviously pure speculation and supposition at this point. There are also some weird rumors out there that Bill and Hillary are going to pull the lever for Romney when they get in there. If you notice, every time we turn around, he's complimenting Romney, and he had to say what he said at the convention, the DNC.
And he loved the microphone. He loved the microphone, Clinton. He would not give that speech up. It was, he wanted another term in office.
He went on and on and on. It was similar when he was governor of Arkansas and gave that speech at the RNC, or DNC, 20 years ago. He just rambled on and on. I got to say, though, other than the fact that it was very lengthy and wordy, and he had lived 90% of it. It was a good speech.
I thought so.
It gave a good bounce. It gave a good bounce for Obama, who was tanking in the polls.
But do you believe the polls? You mentioned earlier you don't believe the polls. I have said for a while it's going to be a landslide Romney win, not because I support Romney. I never have, and I still don't, and I'm not voting for him. It's easy for me to not vote for him in a state like California that's going to go heavy Obama, so my vote isn't going to count. I hate saying that, but it's easy for me to go third party here. But I've said for a while it's going to be a landslide Romney win. And I don't think that the Tea Party and the people that are concerned about the finances and the reckless credit card spending of $16 trillion in debt with a president who will not pass a budget and prove that he's serious, mixed in with a few smirks and I don't want to be here anymore or this is beneath me. I think this guy is beyond fired. I think it's going to be a landslide win for Romney. You're saying the same thing. People around me are telling me I'm crazy. But I don't believe the polls, and I don't think that the 2010 midterm elections have finished speaking. That was saying, Mr. President, we disagree with your policies a lot. I don't think it's changed because unemployment went from 8.1 to 7.8 at all.
No, that's smoke and mirrors. It's a joke. We knew that was going to happen. And, of course, your gasoline just went up 14 cents in California. But, no, the truth of the matter is I don't listen or watch the polls very much. I keep the corner of my eye on them, Brian, because they're a good barometer as to what is not going to happen. Look at Scott Walker, who my buddy up in Milwaukee, who faced a terrible recall election. I mean, the Democratic Party and the labor unions dumped millions and millions of dollars into that thing and had people on the ground. And the polls showed that Scott Walker was going to lose the recall of the state of Wisconsin as governor by 8 to 10 to 12 points. He actually won it by 14 points.
He won by more than he did in his original election. He got a larger percentage than he did the first election.
No, you're exactly right. It was a super landslide with a much larger margin than the previous election. This proves that these pollsters are really inaccurate. There was a time when Gallup and Zogby and Trindex were fairly reliable, save for Truman defeats Dewey. They were fairly reliable. But ever since 2000, they've been very inaccurate. And the only one that you can really trust now a little bit is Rasmussen. If you take Ohio, for instance, the state of our birth, they have Romney down by 8 to 10 points in Ohio. Brian, I guarantee you that when you adjust that thing for the margin of error of 3.3 or 3.5, I guarantee you the president has no more than a 1 or 2 point lead in the Buckeye State.
I am very interested to see how this plays out because, using the sports analogies, people that I watched kind of grade the debates after the fact were saying that if this was a boxing match, Romney won 13 of the 15 rounds. There wasn't a knockout punch, but by the time it was over, it was, holy crap, this guy just wiped the floor with him. So I'm interested to see what happens, and I would love to see Shoeless Joe Biden. I would love to see him I'd like to see him get fired up during these presidential debates, because if there's one thing that Paul Ryan is, it's a guy that's fairly calm, cool, and collected, who understands mathematics and is eager to call out all the hypocrisy and the failures of the current administration. I am really looking forward to the vice presidential debates.
Well, I am too. You know, Paul Ryan makes the Democrats look so old. That is a quote from Peggy Noonan, the columnist in the Wall Street Journal and the former speechwriter for Reagan. Paul Ryan makes the Democrats look so ancient and so last year and so 1950-ish. You know, and this thing, they're trying to demonize Paul by, you know, he pushed his grandmother over the cliff in a wheelchair. He actually wants to save Medicare. Listen, Obama wants to do away with Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, and our senior citizens are so brainwashed by demagoguery, they think just the opposite. By the way, let me say this real quick. Romney did not tell one lie in that debate. I say that as an objective debate watcher and judge. Everything Obama said was a lie, but what's David Axelrod out today doing? David Axelrod and all the Democratic spinmeisters are saying, you know, he whipped them. It was a great performance, but everything that Romney said was a lie. Actually, au contraire, everything that Obama said was a lie. But be that as it may, you can't listen to the polls, you can't watch the polls. But our vote does count. Maybe not in California, but it does count elsewhere. I mean, if one person in 1960 had voted differently, Nixon would have won the presidency. In the state of Illinois, if one person had voted differently in each precinct in the state of Illinois, even with the voter fraud in Cook County, Nixon would have been the president instead of JFK. Look at 2000. It came down to 90 votes. And I had all the Methodists out there voting for Bush. They usually vote Democratic. They went out, and we got those Methodist churches out because both Cheney and Bush were Methodists. And when that thing came down to 90 votes, I was very proud of myself and my people. Then we made sure it was a landslide in 2004. But, yeah, you can't listen to the polls. And getting back to, you're right, Brian, this guy has never had a tough question in his life. And man, what do you think of Jim Laird? Do you think he's as senile as Joe Biden is?
I'll say this. I think Laird did great. And I'm not going to call it Lair or whatever these southern pronunciations are. It's ridiculous. It's Lairer. Because I kept watching after the fact, and everyone's using this strange drawl, and I'm like, come on, man, that's not this guy's name. I loved it. He would toss a question out there, and he got out of the way. He stayed out of it. He didn't make it about him. It wasn't a little man trying to play tough for a day. It wasn't some Democratic hack who's been in there and you prompted the president with the question so that he could craft some nice zingers and try to ambush the other guy, because you will see that.
Blitzer, yeah.
You will see it. I loved what he did. I loved that he just kind of asked, and he got ran over. Let's not be. I think Mitt Romney having to deal with Newt Gingrich really taught Mitt Romney how to not get run over. And Romney kind of ran over Jim Lair. You know, he didn't tolerate trying to be talked down or stifled. He just said, "Nope, I got something else to say. Let me finish." Early on, like 5-10 minutes in, Romney pulled one of those. Well, I believe that you gave him the first chance, so I think I'm going to take the second. And my wife looks at me and she's like, "Is this a schoolyard? Are these a bunch of little boys out there?" But after that moment, Romney settled down and rocked it. And I like that Laird didn't inject himself and make him the story. When I do radio shows, Bruce, I consider it a conversation. I try to listen.
Yeah.
I try to listen 51% of the time at least, if not more. But I have things to say.
Right.
And so, some radio hosts just ask questions, and that's fine. Occasionally a sentence to here and there. But I've conversations with people. But I try to keep in mind I want to hear 51% new material because I know what I have to say. I've already heard it. Our listeners know where I'm coming from. We're trying to get to know what you're saying. But in the course of these conversations, you can hash out the truth. I liked Jim Lair staying out of it. What did you think about him?
Well, Jim Lair was an elderly man when I was a little boy. He's got to be about 98. But I like Jim Lair. I like Jim Lair a lot. And yes, he's a liberal, but he's an old-fashioned traditional liberal. I can live with them. He is objective. And he let it be a debate, He let it be a debate. And so, I don't know. My verdict is still out on Jim Lair. I do think this will probably be the last debate they ever ask him to moderate, which is a shame.
But getting back to Biden, and your points are well taken there. It's split about 75-25. Is he senile or did he do a good job? But getting back to Biden, we're talking about a vice president, Brian, that has stage 3 or stage 4 Alzheimer's. I think Ryan's going to tear him to shreds.
I think so, too. I think Biden is another one of these bullies, and I consider Obama to be a bully. I absolutely consider him to be a bully. He I mean, as a shakedown artist working as a community organizer, you bully people into getting money. I mean, that's the gig. I have a constituency of people that need things, so I'm going to go get things, and if you don't give me things, I'm going to threaten things, and I better get what I want. And when you become president and you get used to Air Force One, you get used to sitting in the Oval Office and people kissing up to you wherever you go, and you think your stuff doesn't smell, and because you've been elected, the tides will stop rising. I'm going to recede the tides. We're going to change global warming, and I can control the universe. And it gets wacky, and I think it showed. I think the hubris of President Obama showed pushing Obamacare. I think it showed in a debate that he was too good to be at with a guy that he doesn't respect and I should barely even have to dignify you with a response, good sir, is what I saw the thought bubble over his head saying. I think it's all catching up to the president. I just think it's time for him to go.
Yeah, it is. That's what Clint said at the RNC, which I thought was a classic. I don't care what the liberals say. I thought that was a classic. They're trying to say Clint Eastwood was senile. I thought that was a classic little skit with that empty chair. He said, hey, Oprah cried. It was happy. It was great. We had a black elected president. But, sometimes when you don't do the job, it's just time to go. Nothing personal. As far as the president's performance, I mean, in front of 76, conservatively, it might have been 89 million, but 76 million viewers and listeners at least, the curtain was taken back from the Wizard of Oz. We see that there is no Wizard of Oz. It's just this nice old man with the controls, when Toto ripped that curtain back. Or, as the old fable says, the little kid goes, Mommy, the king has no clothes. And, his political nudity and inexperience was revealed for the first time.
And that's him off script.
Had a tough debate.
That's him
never
off
had a
script.
Tough debate.
Well, he had a couple challenging moments with Hillary Clinton because for a while I was convinced Hillary was going to run away with it. I was convinced that Hillary was going to nab that nomination. And great, here we go. We get another Clinton back in the White House. And something changed. Some say it was the Bilderberg meeting they went to, and then things changed after that, but that's a separate topic for a separate day. I think President Obama had a few tough debates back in the day with Hillary Clinton, but he has been consistently pampered for 4 years straight. Absolutely. This is a soft, spoiled bully. And just like Joe Biden, he loves getting out there and talking about these evil rich people like he's not one of them. Number one, but he loves trying to pretend that he's this champion for the people, and he's a mean-spirited bully, just like Barack Obama. I think they're both bullies, Bruce. I really do.
Joe Biden is a dirty, vulgar, senile old man, and I would personally, if I couldn't stand Mitt Romney, and I've always loved the guy, but if I couldn't stand Mitt, I would still vote against Obama, because I wouldn't want Joe Biden one heartbeat away from that Oval Office. Joe Biden is a bully. He had to drop out of the 1988 election because of lies and plagiarism. He cannot be trusted. He caved on the vote because of political pressure when Judge Bork was up for nomination. He knew, and he even told Bork the last night of the hearings, that you're not a nut, you're a good man. But he still didn't have enough courage to vote for him. He's a gutless wonder. He's a bully. He's vulgar, using the F word at a news conference with a little kid. The guy is so last year. And Paul Ryan, man, Paul is sharp. He's articulate. He's young. He looks like a movie star. He's highly intelligent. Probably the most intelligent vice president we've ever had run for office. He has 11 years' experience in Congress. He has the only plan to get us out of debt, or at least try to. He has the only plan to save Medicare and Medicaid. And I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Okay, Medicare, Medicaid, you're right. I think this was 10 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago, you brought up a point about Medicare, that he's trying to save it, and they're trying to save it. Absolutely. I'm 33, Bruce. I don't anticipate that Social Security or Medicare are going to be there because the government has completely mismanaged it. When the program was started, it wasn't intended for people to live to be 105 years old and collect benefits for 40 years. It was never intended to be what it's become. It's a Ponzi scheme, and look what happens to Bernie Madoff. You go to jail for Ponzi schemes, but we give these guys pensions in Washington for some reason. It was a poorly conceived plan back in the day that made a lot of sense and got a lot of votes and sure seemed compassionate at the time, but guess what? A lot of promises were made by dead people, and we cannot fulfill those obligations. You can't do the math to make this work. And I think the Medicare conversation is very interesting, and I appreciate that. Whether this is something that's going to work to change the country and fix those programs, I don't know. We'll wait and see. I have no idea. But I know that President Obama is not serious about it. When you raid Medicare for $700+ billion to get 3 years of taxes before Obamacare even starts is a Trojan horse to destroy the private healthcare industry, just so it can be a single payer system, a socialist redistribution of the healthcare system you don't spread innovation, you spread failure. And that's what happens when you stretch this stuff out. You privatize the good stuff and you socialize the bad stuff. I just don't like it at all. I think it was just a bad idea. But back to the debates real quick. Saying that President Obama and Joe Biden, and I think a lot of politicians are bullies, by the way. I'm not just going to say President Obama and Joe Biden. A lot of them are bullies. And frankly, I think Mitt Romney and the RNC were bullies when they changed the rules to omit Ron Paul from participating in the RNC, which is the main reason why I will not hold my nose and hope Romney does good. He lost me when he bullied Ron Paul, and the Republican National Convention bullied Ron Paul out of what he earned. He earned a plurality of 5 states and a speaking role, and they bullied him, and they cheated so that it could make it seem like everybody's behind Romney when they really weren't. So for me, I'm equal opportunity calling these people bullies, Bruce.
You are. I got to admit, while I, again, disagree with your take on Romney and your ultimate decision to vote for Mr. Johnson, I do admire your unwavering political convictions. How about these undecided people, bless their hearts? If they don't know who they're going to vote for by now, either they're morons or they have no political interest at all. But yeah, I respect you. I'm about a half a step away from being a libertarian in many venues and on many issues. I just think that we need to put the country first over partisanship, and you got to remember this statement. Dr. Wendell Evans, the great theologian, an educator, said this: compromise is the curse of religion, but it is the beauty and the art of politics. And sometimes you got to give up one of your political principles to save the nation. I'm sure there were people in the Continental Army, Brian, that didn't totally agree with George Washington, the general, and people in the Minutemen and the
he almost lost
US
his job,
Army.
Bruce. He almost lost his job after he got smacked down the first few battles. There was an internal power struggle. There was almost a revolt inside to replace General Washington. They were just about done with him. Just about.
Yeah, same with Lincoln. Same with Abraham. We literally worship Abraham Lincoln. But the truth is, Lincoln was very unpopular, and the polls at that time said that General McClellan was going to beat him in, the re-election bid, and half of his cabinet hated his guts, and so sometimes you got to give a little bit, you got to take a little bit, but we got to get this man out of the White House. It's not personal. I kind of like him. I really do. I never really liked Bill Clinton. I just detected so much facade and pomp, But I like Obama. I don't dislike him personally. I like his charisma, and I disagree. Most conservatives say I'm nuts. My fellow conservatives and constitutionalists, they hate his guts personally. And but it's not about skin color. When my man dropped out, I went for Herman Cain. And even though I knew Mitt 5 years ago was going to win, I did not endorse him. I endorsed Governor Rick Perry. He's a personal friend of mine, and I endorsed him.
Herman Cain was interesting. I was very interested in Herman Cain. I liked how he was blunt. He was fresh. He was on. He just put it out there. Here you go. And he's a guy that's a professional radio guy, so he putting it out there, he knows how to craft his dialogue. He's a master of speech himself. My concern with him was that he was a Federal Reserve that he was involved in the Federal Reserve System, which many people say is destroying our nation right now. So I could never get behind him. He was never the pizza guy. He was the Federal Reserve guy to me. But yeah, I mean, you have to pick different people at different times. And if your guy, I liked what Mike Huckabee said. He was a little too personally conservative for me, which I'm sure you appreciated 4 years ago, being a Baptist pastor, a Baptist preacher. He was a little personally too conservative for me, but when it came to the policies, I liked what Governor Huckabee had to say. I endorsed him. He's the first person I ever donated to a campaign. And then he was out. I held my nose and voted for McCain last time. I held my nose and said, I don't like this guy. I don't trust this guy, but he's better than the other guy. And I just can't do it this time, Bruce. I just can't do it. I've been burned by it. And once you, like in the Matrix, you take the red pill, the blue pill. Once you discover the truth that you can't go back, I just don't believe there's a difference between this corrupt two-party system anymore, and I can't participate in a two-party system that I feel has run our country into the ditch for 100 years now.
Well, I respect deeply your strong convictions, but let me just say this, Brian, and I mean this. Romney is no McCain, and McCain is no Romney. The insiders in the Democratic Party told me, see, I still have a lot of old friends that are still bigwigs in the Democratic Party. And a lot of power brokers in the Democratic Party told me several years ago that the only man they didn't like and the only man that they feared was Mitt Romney.
Because
Mitt is so intelligent. You could see that in the debate. And he's not this flaming liberal. And by the way, if he is a flaming liberal Republican, then why don't the Democrats go for him? This should be somebody that they should be, that they should embrace. But he's not. He's a moderate to conservative. He's a pragmatist. Everything he's touched has turned to gold. He's a Ronald Reagan. He's not quite as conservative as Ronnie, but he's a Ronald Reagan. He's sharp. He's elegant. He's articulate. He's presidential. He's got a high IQ. He salvaged the Olympics. He was a very good governor in the most liberal and democratic state, Mass. And, he's not McCain. McCain was like an 88-year-old funeral director at a funeral director's convention who didn't even want to win anyway. And he was an ultra liberal Republican. So,
Wait,
I
what was
held my
he? He
nose
was
and voted for Sarah Palin. I held my nose and voted for Sarah Palin.
He was a funeral director at a funeral directors convention.
An 88-year-old undertaker at a funeral director's convention.
Well, you touched upon a couple good points there. But by the way, we're talking with Bruce Engelman, pastor, author, sports commentator, political junkie, history buff, motivational speaker, and my uncle. You touched on the fact that Mitt Romney's coming from one of the most liberal states in our union, being Massachusetts, and I've heard some of the pundits and I've listened to him say a few things, and I think even in the debates he referenced that it was a blessing in disguise that he had to govern there, because you had to sit down with the opposition and make compromises, because just like Reagan, I think it was attributed to Reagan saying that politics is about compromise. You have to keep 70% and give 30%. That 30% that you really want, you got to come back and renegotiate for that on the next deal. But if you're getting 70 and giving 30, you make a deal. What President Obama did was, come on, I'm the Messiah. I'm the chosen one. Look I'm bigger than the office. This is transcendental. I'm going to stop the oceans from rising. I can control the sun and the solar flares, increasing our solar system's increased heat, not just the planet. And if there's no cars on the other planets, it's not because of carbon. Anyway, global warming is a whole other complicated issue. But he said, I have a supermajority in Congress. I don't need to work with a single one of you. And if you don't like it, get out of the way. I'm Barack Obama. Well, guess where you're at now, Barack Obama? You lost the nation because you're not working with other people. You can blame. He's tried to blame everyone but himself for every problem this country's had, and I think he's still running on, well, the recession was a lot worse than I anticipated. George Bush left me a lot worse of a job than I thought I initially had. He doesn't take responsibility for anything. And I think it's finally going to catch up to him. I really do, because What Romney said is, on my first day, prior to that, on my first day elected, I'm going to sit down with the Democrats. And Obama's retort is, well, good luck sitting down with the Democrats because you're going to repeal Obamacare. What a jerk. What a dunce. I thought that line, what a dunce, when he said that. Came back that way so personal. It's like, the country doesn't want your Obamacare. I'm sorry, man. They don't want it. And you have to sit down with the opposition. Barack Obama does not believe that. He believes in supermajorities and dictatorship rule, which is what makes him frightening in that office.
Very, very well stated, Brian. I agree. The public has rejected from the get-go this Obamacare. It is socialized medicine. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it health care. You can call it Obamacare. You can call it Romney care. It is socialized medicine. The leading surgeon in Fort Worth told me that he will probably retire if Obamacare goes through. This guy is a great doctor, a fantastic individual, probably the top surgeon in the history of our city. And he's representative of tens of thousands of doctors and surgeons and nurses that are going to leave the profession if Obamacare gets through. I don't want to have to wait 2 years for an appendectomy. I don't want the government to tell me with a death panel, well, I'm 88 years of age now and I got stage 3 cancer and stage 4 Alzheimer's like Biden does. And so, you're going to be put last on the list. This 22-year-old mother is more important. The government needs to stay out of health care. I was so glad to hear Mitt Romney bring up Cleveland Clinic and Mayo Clinic.
Wow, he brought it up as a swing state thing. That was purely political.
Did you notice that? They kept talking about New Hampshire, Michigan, Ohio. Cleveland Clinic was mentioned 3 times. You're right. But the point is, I'm glad they brought it up from this standpoint, regardless of their ulterior motive. They both brought up Cleveland Clinic. We have 3 of the outstanding hospitals in the world. MD Anderson in Houston is curing cancer every day. It is the most phenomenal hospital. It has a 100% rating in U.S. News and World Report. Cleveland Clinic is just doing phenomenal stuff with hearts. And the Mayo Clinic, man, that's the greatest hospital in the history of medicine. And they treat everything at Mayo Clinic. I've had 7 friends cured of cancer out at Mayo Clinic, and that the other hospitals and clinics gave up on, except MD Anderson. And if you get Obamacare in, you're going to lose the MD Andersons, the Cleveland Clinics, the Mayo Clinics, the Sloan Ketterings, the Johns Hopkins.
Why is that?
Why? Dana-Farbers in Boston, the Roswells of Buffalo. Because it's liberalism, it's socialism. They want an equal playing field. They don't want one hospital to be better. They don't want the Mayo Clinic and MD Anderson and Dana-Farber to be better than Parma General on the southwest side of Cleveland.
Well, have you also read about Agenda 21? Is that anything that's on your radar yet?
No, please enlighten me.
Man, in a nutshell, and I listened to our good friend John B. Wells. He's been a regular co-host and guest over here at the New American Media, but he's on Coast to Coast AM. He had a 4-hour show about Agenda 21, passed under Bush Sr., down in Brazil at the United Nations conference on whatever it was. And, well, basically it's to punish the suburbs and increase the price of gasoline and create all of these mini cities. People in the Democratic Party tend to think, well, we need to punish the suburbs because they've taken their tax dollars away from the inner cities. We need to go get them. We need to make sure that gasoline's $5 a gallon so we can get them. And the people that are taking public transportation are going to win. It's about basically, Bruce, controlling every single thing on this planet, cradle to grave. And we're 25 years into this thing, or 1992. So 02, 12, so about 20 years now. But, there is this theory out there that everything, it's not about equal, like you said, level the playing field. I think most rational people want an even playing field. And when we look at Wall Street and the abuses and the crony capitalism and the fascism going on with big corporations, Wall Street and politics, it's a scam and it's a sham. But I think people want an equal playing field. What you can't guarantee are equal results. And this president just wants to take from the successful and redistribute because he knows better. He can redistribute the climate. Just give me a chance to increase the energy consumption because under my plan, energy prices will necessarily skyrocket, says candidate Obama. And here we are. Gas prices, like you said, I think they went up 14 or 19 cents in California in one day yesterday. I paid, what was it, $60 to fill up my tank. I was paying about $5 or $6 a gallon out in the desert a few months ago. It's insane, Bruce. It doesn't have to be this way. I know it doesn't have to be this way. And I think this whole global mindset of they're so much smarter and they can micromanage and control everything, whether it's Agenda 21, which we can talk about later. It's a much more complicated issue than I was able to articulate to you there. But it's about controlling every resource from water to transportation to healthcare, and it's all just one extra nail into the coffin. And it freaks me out because that's not what this country's supposed to be, Bruce.
I'm reading a book now called The Economic Assassins, and it's kind of the same principle, that these are things that the political parties in this country, particularly the Democratic Party, yes, have been pulling for years. The Democrats shoot their own president, John F. Kennedy, and they blame it on the conservatives. They run the price of gas up. When Obama took over, Brian, the price of gasoline national average was $1.86 a gallon. By the way, gas should be no more than $1.25, $1.30 a gallon. But anyway, it was $1.86 when Obama took over. It's edging up to $5 again, like you said, in both California and Chicago. There's no need for this. We have more oil and natural gas than we know what to do with. But you're right, the modern Democratic Party, not the party of Scoop Jackson and Howard K. Smith and Kennedy and Truman and those great patriots, but the modern Democratic Party, led by David Axelrod and Obama, they hate the middle class. They
Valerie
love the rich,
Jarrett, George Soros.
and they love the poor. They love the poor and they love the rich, but they hate the suburbs and they despise the middle class. And that's why they hate Romney.
And you know what I said? I was talking on Eccentric Perspective. I do a show with Blake Wally, co-host on Eccentric Perspective. It's a show on freedomizerradio.com Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, noon to 1:30. And I said, it's kind of like this, Blake. Here's my interpretation of what's happening. You got a middle class, and it's being stretched on one side at the ultra-rich, call it the 1%, at the risk of discussing the Occupy movement. And on the other side, you have welfare. You have, I've run into bad times. I've made bad decisions. I'm down on my luck. I'm injured. I can't work. Whatever the case may be, the welfare state, just call it the very poor. And you're standing on a platform that kind of keeps tilting, and it keeps tilting, and it keeps tilting. And more people are sliding off, falling into poverty. And it's getting harder and harder to hang on as the ground you're standing on is inverted. This used to be a country, Bruce, prior to the Federal Reserve, where our money was made out of gold and silver. One person could go to work and pay for things with gold and silver, and they could have a wife at home that didn't have to work. They could raise a family. They could have a little home and a car and have a little bit of a life. And our money is not worth anything anymore. So we're all running around like chickens with our heads cut off. Families are stretched thin. You barely get to see each other anymore. And as the platform keeps rising, you can't climb up to that 1%, because this used to be a country where you could be super poor and easily climb up to middle class, and middle class was fair. Middle class was all right. Middle class jobs you could work at for 3 decades if you weren't a deadbeat, and you could pay for things and pay off mortgages and have a retirement plan. You can't do that anymore because the value of the dollar isn't worth anything anymore since the Federal Reserve took over under Woodrow Wilson in 1913. And what you have is fewer people can hold on to middle class, and they're either giving up or they're slipping off and falling into ultra poverty. And there's that Cloward and Piven strategy from the 60s, this radical strategy that says, hey, if you want to turn this country into communism and Marxism, here's what you do. You bombard the social welfare programs, and you bankrupt the country, and you do a flip where the people need you, they're dependent upon you. And that's where that 47% kind of comes from, is kind of identifying that this is a political strategy to make people poor, to make them dependent on permanent votes. And here we are. It's insane that we've gotten to this.
It really is. It's a shame. The country that your father and I grew up in was a great nation. We had our problems. We certainly did. But Americans would pull together, and neighbors would pull together, community, would pull together. And the politicians, whether they were Democrat or Republican, loved this country and stood up for the middle class and stood up for John Q. Public and Joe Sixpack and stood up for schools and churches and synagogues and stood up for Israel and England and Canada, our closest allies, And the Mexicans that came over here worked very, very hard and became Mexican Americans and built some great businesses in Texas and California. But the politicians today, especially the Democrats, all they care about is maintaining their power base. They don't love their own country. Obama's the first president that doesn't love America. Brian, I'm convinced of it. And he despises Netanyahu, and he's an anti-Semite. You know, the only ally we got is Israel, for crying out loud. Well, other than England, and he sent back the bust of Churchill. And I encourage all of your listeners and viewers to please go see 2016 and understand. I thought it was a very good movie, very objective documentary by D'Souza and the producer of Schindler's List. What makes this guy tick? This movie will show us what makes Obama tick and why he hates England and why he despises Israel and why he hates his own country. This man has some serious mental and emotional issues against this great nation. But, you know, I grew up in home Pennsylvania, and prior to that, Parma and Broadview Heights. People didn't lock their doors at night. Brian, a handshake was better than a contract. Your neighbors pitched in if there was a calamity, both in the city and the country. We had block parties in Parma and Cleveland. We had reunions together, 3 or 4 families get together in home Pennsylvania. And if there was a war breakout, we all stuck together. And now we're just a bunch of disenfranchised, vested interest groups that are just out for what I can suck out of America. What can I milk out of this great nation? You know, what happened to JFK? You know, ask not. What happened to that? No, it's now, what can I, my name is Jimmy, I'll take all you give me, Uncle Sam.
And somebody did me wrong. They owe me. They only got rich at my expense. Those evil sons. I feel like it is such a dangerous place that we have entered, Bruce. If we can make it through this election and to the handoff of the presidency perhaps to somebody else, I will count my lucky stars and my blessings. I also, for the record, do not and will not. I will not trust any October surprise, any huge foreign conflict, any war effort, any terrorist attack that occurs between now and the election. Anything that happens between now and then will stink to high heaven to me. People bring up 9/11. People bring up the Gulf of Tonkin. People bring up the Bay of Pigs event, but that didn't really turn into anything, although it got real close. People bring up Pearl Harbor. Since the beginning of time, call it the Trojan horse knocks on your door. You know, I am so concerned that we're going to be able to get out of this safe, because I really believe that this president has an angry streak in him, that he hates colonialism. And he said it in his own words. You know, he sought out the Marxist professors and the punk rock poets. You know, in his words, he's talking about what he's doing, although you haven't seen any of his records. But you know what Attorney General Eric Holder's doing. Fast and furious. Literally arming the enemies of the United States to kill the citizens of the United States who are working on the Border Patrol, whether it's Brian Terry or anybody else, whether it's the ambassador to Libya. It is obvious that he doesn't like Israel. Now, there are a lot of people that say Israel's behind a lot of all of these problems in the world, and you and I get into this issue. I'm not necessarily one of them, but I'm listening, because global geopolitics, it's just a big game of risk. It's really trying to control the globe's resources. And I really think that we have a president that is not really looking out for the best interests of our team. I think what he's looking out for is to even the playing field. The Yankees have been too good for too long. Now I'm the coach. I'm going to trade away some of my good players to the Kansas City Royals and the Pittsburgh Pirates. They deserve a chance. That Steinbrenner's kept us down for too long. Yes, the Indians connection, of course. But I really feel like he wants to remake this world in, like you said, in a Fabian socialistic way. And it really creeps me out when he tries to push for legislation like the NDAA that says you can be indefinitely detained without charge, without trial, throughout the duration of a conflict, and the United States of America is the battlefield now. Why in the world would a president want that kind of authority when it wasn't called for? Why does he want that? What? You don't pass the laws on prohibition to let it sit there. You start enforcing it. And for me, someone who speaks on the radio as a journalist, protected under my First Amendment rights, well, I watch Libya and see that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama are apologizing for misusing the First Amendment. You can't misuse the First Amendment. It's impossible, Bruce. You cannot misuse the First Amendment. You can be a jerk, but you can't misuse the right to be a jerk. I'm more than a little concerned right now.
Well, you should be concerned. All of us broadcasters should be concerned because we have a man in jail now. It's not for parole violation, nor because he produced an award-winning trailer for some documentary. I have not seen the film. Everybody tells me it's like an amateur homemade video or movie. But the point is, he is in jail because he criticized Islam. We have lost our First Amendment and Second Amendment rights in the last 3 weeks because of these ill-failed foreign policies of this current administration. And by the way, I'm sick and tired, Brian, of having unarmed guards, or at the very least rubber bullets, protecting our embassies, working along the borders, and rubber bullets, if they even have those on the military bases. Let's rearm our military. Let's send about 50 Marines and 10 Navy SEALs with loaded M16s with live ammunition to protect our ambassadors. What's this rubber bullet stuff? You think the Al-Qaeda comes at us with rubber bullets? But getting back to your First and Second Amendment rights, they have been destroyed by Hillary Clinton and President Obama in the last 3 weeks because they botched up the embassy and the terrorist attacks on 9/11.
Well,
and,
if that's the case,
and we can't. You and I are going to go to jail for criticizing Islam.
But if that's the case, though, and by the way, Barack Obama did say something strange at the UN, saying that the future must not belong to those who would insult the Prophet of Islam. What in the hell does that phrase mean? What in the hell does that phrase mean? But if you're going to blame Hillary Clinton and you're going to blame Barack Obama for the problems of the First and Second Amendment, you got to go back to President Bush and the Patriot Act with illegal warrantless wiretaps, because that's completely unconstitutional, and 11 years later we still have that after 9/11. So this is an equal opportunity issue, Bruce, and that's once again one of the issues where we start to kind of veer apart there, and I see it as a general scam. Sometimes you hate the Democrats, sometimes you hate the Republicans, but at the end of the day, whoever they are, they always get what they want. And it's not for us to have more rights, it's so that we have less of them. But it is concerning. Why in the world would people have rubber bullets? And when I heard that, our troops were unarmed at the time. Then why are they there? Aren't they there to protect? They should be armed to the teeth. What are you kidding me? They're not armed. I was astonished to hear that, but then I remember that Fort Hood was a workplace incident. It was a workplace shooting, not an act of terrorism or an act of war. So that's what this administration does.
No.
Right. Nothing to see here.
They had to call a little 5'4" policewoman from Killeen PD and to shoot that sniper down because a terrorist. Because I was told Jimmy Carter, when he was president, disarmed the MPs and SPs on our military bases.
Those are the people supposed to be protecting people. You can't do that if you're unarmed. And there's a Second Amendment right to be armed. I mean, it's so obvious.
Wait a minute. Brian, I thought the liberals always say that the Second Amendment is referencing only arming the Navy, the militia, and the Army. Well, guess what? We don't even arm them anymore.
Well, you and I are the militia. Oh, I said a dirty word. But what is a militia? It's an emergency volunteer service to step up in times of crisis to help the local community. Oh, but that's a bad word somehow. It's only in our Constitution and our Bill of Rights because everybody's a militia member. Everyone has to do the best self-defense you possibly can because, like our friend Stuart Rhodes from Oath Keepers, I don't know if you're familiar with that organization or not. He's been on the program before, but it's like he says, when seconds count, police are only minutes away.
Yeah.
This whole concept of disarming ourselves and allowing others to think for us and ration out what we're allowed to have, it's just something very foreign to me. It's something that does not sit well in my blood, and I'm just constantly reminded of that quote, resistance to tyranny is obedience to God. No matter what version of God you choose to buy, and that's not important to me, but resistance to tyranny is obedience to God. I think God wants people to be free and have an equal opportunity, but the results, hey man, that's up to you, I think.
Well, that's why I'm for Mitt Romney. He's for free markets, free enterprise, open markets. But getting back to the militia, Brian, Mike Boys and I, we armed ourselves with shotguns and rifles when there was a killer on the loose in our backyard, and the SWAT team there in Fort Myers, Florida, Lehigh Acres, Lee County Sheriff's Department, Mike Scott, my good friend, and Ed Tamaya, the captain, the assistant chief, dear friend. We were hand in hand with. We were a little militia, the Engelman boys, with our rifles and shotguns, man. And there they were with their AR-14s and M16s, and we formed a little militia. The Continental Army and the Minutemen, what were they? They were a militia. What was the Civil War? The Union Army and the Southern Army, the Confederates. They were militias, And I think we need to go back to the Old West days where everybody packs a six-shooter, and the sheriff or the marshal puts together a posse. What was the posse? It was a little militia that was deputized. We're so far away from the Constitution, Brian, it's not even funny.
And you know what happens when you get too far from the Constitution. Thomas Jefferson said the tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. And Bruce, I'm telling you, man, I don't want to see things continue to devolve. But what I've seen in person, I was at an event with some of my friends about a month ago or so, and the police swooped in on this place. It was a party. Apparently there was a noise complaint. They swooped in with 6 or 10 cop cars and 20 or 25 people and the police helicopter. I had a tight end type officer get up in my face, start barking at me, grab me by two arms, about 6'4", 6'5", 250, 260, almost throw me down a flight of stairs because I was standing at my friend's home with a glass of water. When I got downstairs, another guy got up in my face and started threatening me with other stuff. There is a complete militarization of our police forces, and it creeps me out. When it reached out and grabbed me, literally, that day, I became more concerned than I've ever been, and I've been concerned for a long time, since 9/11, that this Constitution is falling apart, that this global governance scam is something that people are legitimately pushing, and I don't know that the police force really understands that they need to pick a side, and it really creeped me out when they got militarized and violent with me over nothing. They are so hyper aggressive. There was no need for them to act the way that they did. They're public servants. They're not Gestapo.
Did you report them? Did you report them?
It's a longer story. The answer is, there were.
Brian, the reason why I asked that, I've noticed over the last 30 years that most of the violent police brutality comes out of California. I am currently the chaplain of 2 police departments. For the city of Fort Worth, I'm a Kappa chaplain, and I'm the head chaplain for Forest Hills, Texas, a suburb to the south of Fort Worth. And I know 100% of the officers at Forest Hills, and I know probably 40%. We got 890 officers, not including detectives, for this big city here. And I know many officers, and I work with them in 3 or 4 different capacities, not just as a chaplain. I do some intelligence work for FPD, FWPD, and I'm in the ride-along program and different venues. And every Fort Worth policeman, I've been on bus, I've been on arrest, I've been on drug bus, I've been in hostage situations. The Fort Worth Police Department, they're 95 to 99% of them are gentlemen and highly professional. Every time I hear of a Rodney King beating, it seems to come out of California. And I just have to wonder if it's not because your laws are so liberal out there and they all favor the criminal and persecute the victim and the cops, that it may be an overreaction, or they're just so frustrated that they need to go back and watch Hill Street Blues.
And they could have accomplished everything they accomplished. They were actually yelling back at people. And I've worked in bars my whole life, bartending and whatnot. And I know when bouncers are getting people out of a nightclub and they're going downstairs. Just like at one of the bars I worked at and another place where I was at this party. When you're getting people, drunk people, out of a place and they're walking down the stairs, say the people walking downstairs turn around and yell something up at the bouncers, say something to them, bark at them, say something a little whatever. The bouncers sure as hell do not yell back and try to antagonize an escalation of the event. That is exactly what these police were doing, and I could not believe it. And I turned around from where I was at, and I said, you guys don't need to be escalating this. And that's when that little Asian cop got up in my face and started threatening me. I could feel his breath on my face. He wanted to fight. The guy upstairs that almost threw me down wanted to fight. The guys yelling at the people walking out wanted them to turn around and say something else. I mean, Bruce, it was creepy beyond belief. It was secret. It reminded me of like the Gestapo tactics that I used to read about. And every day when our civil liberties are taken away, and the Supreme Court can't even get the 10th Amendment thing right with Obamacare, where they can force you to purchase a private product, we're really running out of options at this point. I don't know what else to say. Be a chaplain to me for a second. What do you say to someone who is really feeling the grip of fascism, the grip of tyranny starting to literally reach out and touch me? What would you say to me?
I would say, number one, you have legitimate complaints and concerns. We have a fascist in the White House, and that's what fascism is. It's socialism. Nazi stands for National Socialist Party. We have a fascist administration that wants to strip us of all of our constitutional rights, including criticizing Islam, and take our free speech amendments away and our freedom of religion away, and dictate to the priests and the rabbis and the preachers what they can say from the pulpit. And they want to ramrod socialized medicine down our throats when 69% of the American public is strongly against it. On the matter of police brutality, that's why I asked you if you reported it. It should be reported. That kind of treatment should not be tolerated. And again, I go back to the fact that most of the police departments that I work with across the nation, and in my motivational speaking across the nation, I often patrol with police departments all over the country. Of course, they're going to act a little bit better because I'm there. But still, I become a cop. I'm not a chaplain who happens to be in a cop car. I'm a cop who happens to be a chaplain. And I get treated as a police officer both in Forest Hills and Fort Worth, Texas. And I'm here to tell you, most policemen do not act that way. Brian, always remember this. Every police officer literally puts his or her life on the line every traffic stop. You never know what kind of weapon that idiot's going to have in their lap, or if they just escaped from a jail or a prison. And these cops face everything. Everything is loaded against them. The patrolman that I go out with, he's been my partner for 5 years. He came to Aunt Connie's funeral. He's like my brother. And we would die for each other, and we treat each other as mutual cops. You know, he's a Christian. He's a gentleman. He's a highly professional police officer. He's a good detective, even though he's a patrolman. And I can attest to the fact that he's got a log because of potential lawsuits, Brian. He has to log every minute of every day in that squad car. It's not every crime or every hour like it used to be. It's every minute. Anytime he puts his lights or siren on, he has to document it. There's cameras in the car watching every one of his movements. And yet again, he puts his life on the line every time we pull somebody over. And, the courts are against the cops. The juries are against the cops. So, number one, I would say, as a chaplain to a victim of police brutality, don't judge every cop because you experienced a bad apple. Number two, I would tell that Asian officer, please use Binaca or Listerine if he's going to get in your face.
Well, it's even worse than that, Bruce, because when they went inside of the home, and the guy who lived there...
Did they have a warrant? Did they have a warrant, Brian?
So the guy that lived there was saying, you're not allowed to be in my home. And that they kept challenging him. Oh, you're really going to go there with me? You're going to tell me what I can and can't do? You really want to go down that road with me, buddy? That's what this guy's saying. So he brings out his camera and he's videotaping him. He said, excuse me, I have not given you authorization to be inside my home. And he's filming him going through. They're going into rooms and looking in closets. I'm telling you, I can't make this up, Bruce. I have the video. And
was this LAPD? Was this LAPD?
Yes, it was. It was LAPD. And they go into the back room, and he's filming him. So they turn around, and these police do not appreciate being filmed, mind you. And it's my understanding that some police forces, I can't confirm if this particular force or this squad was, but many of them are mic'd up, recording the audio as it goes down. so that in case something happens after the fact, they can reconstruct through audio, even if they don't have the film from the camera rolling. So they get down to the end of the hallway. They're going into rooms and looking in closets, and this roommate, he's saying, I have not given you authorization to be here. You don't have a warrant. You're not allowed to be here. They turn around at the end of the hallway, and the one guy goes, get away from his gun, get away from his gun, get away from his gun. He wasn't near his gun. Right at that moment, somebody in the hallway opens up the door in the bathroom. Bruce, I am convinced they were getting ready to mess this kid up. I think they were going to baton him, smash his face in, and say, well, you can clearly hear on the audio, sir, in front of a judge. Listen, your magistrate. You can clearly hear on the audio he reached for my gun. And, of course, they'd smash up the phone, and, the phone went missing. There's no data. I'm telling you, that sounds very conspiratorial. But I'm telling you, that's what was in my gut, that they were saying that to take a swing at him, and the guy opened up the bathroom door at the exact perfect time where they couldn't do anything. And, I mean, I can't believe I'm actually retelling this story, that I have to think about these types of things in America today.
Does LAPD still have the dark blue or black uniforms?
Oh, good question. They are dark. Dark blue or black? Yes. Which one? See, that's interesting when you put me on the spot like that. I think they're black. Now I got to go double check. I got to watch a video again. Thanks, Bruce. I don't know. What am I, a colorologist?
In the 1960s and early 70s, the Los Angeles Police Department was rated the top municipal or one of the top city police departments in America. And then after Rodney King and O.J. Simpson, they've really taken some bad public relations blows. I'm sorry to hear about this incident. You would not see that in most of your modern southern cities, especially Fort Worth and Dallas and Houston. I've worked with those police departments. Again, every time I hear of these stories, they come out of Southern California. And I think the cops are just so frustrated because of the laws and the courts. And you're right. The ATF under the Clinton administration became a bunch of jackbooted thugs busting into people's homes without warrants and taking Elian Gonzalez out of the very arms of a sailor that saved his life and shipped him back to his father. And well, he should be with his parents. This country takes kids away from their parents every day. CPS and CPC and Child Protective Services and all this. So once the Lord returns and that trumpet sounds and the rapture happens, the Gestapo there will be no leash on the Gestapo. But again, don't brand every cop because you experienced a couple of bad apples there at that party.
Well, I would recommend that you take a look at Oath Keepers. I don't know are you familiar with their organization at all, Oath Keepers?
No, sir, I'm not. I've never even heard of them.
All right. You're going to need to go check out oathkeepers.org. Stuart Rhodes is the founder. He founded this organization. He's a constitutional scholar, and he's a very sharp man, but he founded this organization after Hurricane Katrina when police were confiscating the guns from the citizens. You're not allowed to do that. And they were asking him after the fact, well, why were you obeying that? That's an unconstitutional order. And he said, well, our superiors told us. And so he founded Oath Keepers to remind those in our police forces and our military that you are not in that job, in that position of power, to obey illegal and unconstitutional orders from politicians or superiors. You're there to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. To remind these people that whether you're being told to get aggressive, whether you're being told to illegally enter a home, whether you're being told to get violent, whether you're being told to confiscate guns, you are not allowed to do that, and you are sovereign. You are there to defend the Constitution against everyone. And as this stuff gets ratcheted up across the nation, I think it's a very important message. They're called Oath Keepers. They're at oathkeepers.org. Stuart Rhodes is a friend of ours, and he's a regular contributor on the show. So, I will
check it out. I will check it out. The anti-gun laws and gun control laws are the number one communistic regulations and the number one modus operandi of socialists, fascists, Nazis, and commies. The first thing they do is take your guns. The second thing they take away is your Bibles. Remember, and that, let's bring out talk about Mitt Romney's private conversations at a fundraiser where he said 47% of the public are on a dole, like that's not true. How about Mr. Obama at the San Francisco fundraiser 4.5 years ago when he said those Pennsylvania hillbillies and rednecks, all they do is cling to their guns and their Bibles? Well, you know what, Mr. Obama? You're right. The average middle-class American that still hunts and fishes and wants to protect his wife from rape and his daughter from rape, yeah, we do cling to our guns and Bibles. And don't you forget it on November 6th, Mr. Obama, when we vote against you. But I'm here to tell you, Brian, we need to go back to the old Western days where everybody is packing. Kennesaw, Georgia, you have to own a weapon to live in the city of Kennesaw, Georgia. Their crime rate is 2%. In Oak Brook, Illinois, the most stringent gun laws, they have a crime rate of about 60%. We see what happens in Mexico when they totally disarm the public, and the most strict and stringent gun regulations in the world today are in Mexico, and these drug lords and these Mexican mafia guys go in and wipe out a birthday party with 16 teenagers, and they're beheading cops left and right. Let me tell you something. The first thing socialists, Marxists, fascists, Nazis, and commies and liberals want to do, they want to take our guns away, and they can pry my dead cold fingers off of my gun.
I had somebody on one of our other shows talk about, well, if they ever try to come get my guns, they can have them. I'm going to give them to them. Bullets first. And it's like, it's just a it's so frightening to me that all of this is getting escalated. Because, most of the people I know, look, we just want to be left alone. Nobody's out there trying to mess with anyone else. We're not getting in people's way. We're not bothering people. We're not being violent. We're not being criminals. But when people start to reach into my back pocket and steal my Constitution, I take it personal because life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, all the other things are meant to protect that. And if you lose one, what are you going to lose next? At what point does it get out of control? And that's what Oath Keepers is about, Bruce. And you would be in a good position to maybe spread this message around because their goal is to get local representatives to go speak with every sheriff of every police precinct to get them to agree to this, to get them to remind themselves and to say, will you support this? And they have a whole list of what we are and what we are not. And it just says that you are reminded to protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. And if you can reach out to all of these local precincts, then you can reach all of the police force. And whether any politician wants to declare it's a national emergency, well, I had no choice but to enact this emergency protocol, NDAA. And then guess what? Here you are, live from FEMA Region 9. I'm Brian Engelman, supporting my First Amendment right, but I'm sure you'll never hear this because it's being censored. Oh, wait. No, I'm not saying it in the first place. It's just if you allow one domino to fall, the rest go down, and the Second Amendment protects the First Amendment. It's very straightforward to me, Bruce. I just can't believe we're upside down in this cuckoo clock. I don't know when it changed this way or why, but it's got to go back to freedom and liberty because that's the only way this is going to work. I'm not going to stand by and tolerate a totalitarian regime that murders millions of people because whether it's Republican, Democrat, this guy, the next guy, we got to make sure no guy or girl has the opportunity to do something like that.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I think that maybe in the future, a coalition of libertarians, Democrats, Republicans, Reformed, Progressive, Green Party, Libertarian people, as I mentioned, and liberals and conservatives and moderates alike, we need to just stick up for our basic rights and our basic constitutional rights and our basic civil rights. And this is a misnomer, Brian, in political science they taught us that fascism and Nazis are on the far right and reactionaries, and radicals, commies, and socialists are on the far left. The truth is they're all despotic theories of political science. They're all led by dictators and despots who have their own hidden agenda, and their countries are run with an iron fist, and they want to strip us of our constitutional rights and our free enterprise America is great. I love America. I love Democrats. I love Republicans. I love black, white, Hispanic, Asians. We got the greatest nation in the world, and it's worth fighting for. It's worth dying for. And I also am a big proponent of Israel. In fact, I volunteered to fight in their last war last year, and they said, yes, we will arm you. Their army's a militia. Anybody can pretty much join up. And they were going to give me an M16. Well, it didn't break out while I was over there. But I've offered to serve my country twice, the United States Navy in 1986 when I was in Chicago, and after 9/11, I volunteered to enlist in the Marine Corps. I've also offered in Israel, in Jerusalem, to join the Israeli IDF forces. And I think both America and Israel are two countries worth dying for. We're not perfect, but bless God, we got the best democratic republics in the history of constitutional governments. But we need to wake up, and we need to get involved. And wherever your listeners lay their political persuasions, I just beg them to get out and vote and exercise their votes. That's all that I ask.
Well, I think that's a fair statement, something I can agree with as well. I'm going to not be voting for Democrat or Republican. I will vote elsewhere, perhaps in a swing state. It might be okay to hold your nose and vote for the lesser of, and all I can say is we don't know exactly what's going to happen under a Romney presidency, but we know what we're going to get out of an Obama continuation, and I don't want to see that. It's time to fire that head coach and bring someone else in. I don't prefer the candidate that we're offered as a choice with, but we'll see how it all goes. Bruce, we're about out of time for today, so why don't you remind everybody where they can find you again for your radio show?
Yes, it's Sports with Bruce Engelman, and they just need to get on the internet and Google that. They can also Google Athlete Outreach International, or they can Google WRTW, the key, WRTW out of Chicago. That's our flagship station. And see if there's an affiliate in their area that carries our show. If not, they can contact their favorite radio station and get them to carry it. Brian, you're doing a good job. You're doing a nobleman's effort there, and thank you for speaking up for our Constitution and civil liberties.
Hey, Bruce, I appreciate the kind words, but I'm just trying to I'm just trying to protect my parents, my grandparents, my extended family, my friends, and those unborn, just hoping that they get to taste liberty and freedom as well. So thank you again for the Vine today. We'll be talking with you again soon. This is Agree to Disagree. I'm Brian Engelman. This has been the New American Media. Thank you very much for joining us today.
You are listening to the New American Media.